One hot sunny afternoon in a small village in Africa. In the house of Mr. Amoni, a celebration was going on. Ekena has come with his father Caleb to ask for Zara's hand in marriage. Zara and Ekena grew up as friends in the village. They have been friends from childhood, and as they grew older, they became lovers. Their love was so strong that the whole village knew they were dating, and they were inseparable. Zara was very happy that finally, the love of her life, Ekena, has come to ask for her hand in marriage, and she would give anything in this world to be his wife. Zara's father was also happy and accepted that Ekena should come and pay Zara's bride price, but Zara's mother did not want Zara to marry Ekena because Ekena comes from a poor family, and he is just a common trader like his father Caleb. Zara's mother wanted her to marry a rich man, to avoid going through the same thing she went through by marrying Zara's father, who she calls a colossal failure. As Zara's father, Mr. Amoni, was speaking to Ekena's father setting the date they will come with their kinsmen to pay the bride price, Mr. Joe walked into their house unannounced. Mr. Joe happens to be the richest man in the village, and also, Zara's father Mr. Amoni works for him. Mr. Joe owns the only factory in the village, so most of the money the village makes comes from his factory, and nobody goes against him in the village due to his wealth. Zara's father stood up and greeted Mr. Joe and said, "What do I owe this visit, sir? I hope there is no problem." Mr. Joe said, "There is no problem." Zara's father offered him a chair and he sat down, and then he said, "I am here to marry your only daughter Zara. I want to make her my wife." The whole excitement in the house died immediately he said those words. Zara's mother jumped in. "Oh sir, you are welcomed. Please, when do you want your wedding with my beautiful daughter to take place?" Mr. Joe said, "There is no need for too much discussion. I have 2 million here for a bride price." Ekena stood up and shouted, "You lie, sir. Zara is my wife, you cannot take her from me." Mr. Joe started laughing and called Zara's father, "Amoni, will you sit here and allow this small boy insult your boss?" Zara's father replied, "I will not sit, sir, I will stand," and he stood up. Mr. Joe said, "What do you mean?" Immediately Zara's mother, who was so excited about the news, jumped in. "Don't mind my husband, sir, he can be funny sometimes. Let me make you more comfortable." She asked Ekena and his father to excuse them, that her in-law has arrived. Ekena started shouting, "I am not living here without Zara." His father told him, "Son, don't worry, let's go, we will come back." Zara was in her room. She heard what was going on in the sitting room and she started crying. Her mother always bullies her father, and she knows her mother will do whatever it takes to make her marry Mr. Joe. She recalled, few days back, the encounter she had with Mr. Joe. In that encounter, Zara was coming back from the market. Mr. Joe was driving past and saw Zara. He stopped and called her and asked her who she was. She told him and she added, "My father works in your factory. His name is Mr. Amoni." Mr. Joe shouted, "Oh, is that your father? He is a good man. Tell him I will come and marry you and take care of you." Zara's face changed immediately. She shouted, "I am not just an object. I am a human being and I have feelings. I am in love and my husband is coming to pay my bride price, so I am not interested." Mr. Joe said, "We will see, but when I am done with you, money will make you change your mind." Zara shouted, "I am not interested," and walked away. As Zara recalled the encounter, she sat in her room crying because everybody knows Mr. Joe in the village. Due to his wealth, whatever he wants, he gets, so it would take a miracle for her to marry Ekena, after the drama that Mr. Joe just displayed. And if that is not enough, her mother has accepted the 2 million from Mr. Joe. 2 days later, after Mr. Joe brought money to marry Zara, Zara visited Ekena at his house. She pleaded with him to come and take her away from her father's house. Ekena said, "How? What do you want me to do?" Zara suggested, "Can we run away? Let's leave this village and go to the city. Ikenna said, "We have to find another way. Marriage is not by force, it's by choice. You have to tell him you will not marry him, and stand your ground." Zara said, "I don't want to even think about it, but my mother is putting pressure on me, and my father does not want to lose his job. I don't know what to do. Mr. Joe has promised to take care of my family if I marry him, and he will send me to the university since my parents don't have money to send me to university, so we have to come up with a plan. I don't want to lose you." Ikenna assured her he would think of something, and she went back home. That night, Zara's father called her into the sitting room and told her, "My dear, my hands are tied. Your mother has accepted the 2 million bride price on your behalf. I don't know what to do. Your mother is not working, and she never worked, so she is really thinking about what we can achieve with 2 million, and I don't want to lose my job. I wish there is something else I can do, but the way it looks, you will have to marry Mr. Joe." Zara cried, and asked the father, "So you will allow me marry a man I don't love? A man who has been married 3 times and all his wives died one by one mysteriously?" His father could not answer. After all that Zara and Ikenna did, the wedding date was fixed for Zara to marry Mr. Joe. 1 week later, it was their traditional wedding. Zara didn't smile throughout the ceremony. She told Mr. Joe in front of everyone, "I will make your life a living hell, that, I promise you, you can marry me, but you have just inherited trouble for the rest of your life." Mr. Joe laughed and said, "Don't worry, my dear, my money will melt your heart, and I will make sure your family is well taken care of." That evening, as they got to Mr. Joe's house after the wedding, Mr. Joe lived alone. He has 5 children who lives abroad, so only the cook and the cleaner stays in the house with him. Zara slept in the sitting room that night. The next day, Mr. Joe had an early business meeting. As he left the house and went to work, he got a news from Zara's mother that Zara, his wife, is at Ikenna's place. Being a powerful man, he immediately sent police to arrest Ikenna and lock him up, and bring home his wife. The police responded and Ikenna was locked up. In the evening he came home to find that Zara had fired all the workers in the house, and there was no food for him to eat. She told him, "Since you don't want me to be happy, you will also not be happy." Mr. Joe, who is not used to being treated in that manner, only ate fruits that night and went to bed. In the morning, as he woke up and found out that Zara had cooked a very delicious meal, and was eating alone, as he came out and saw the food, he asked her if he could dish some food for her husband. Zara smiled and dished food for him. As he took 1 spoon and ate, he started shouting. His eyes turned red. It turned out that Zara had cooked the food with so much chilies, and due to Mr. Joe's health condition, he is not supposed to eat chilies at all. His heart started burning. Zara quickly called the ambulance and he was rushed to the hospital. He spent 2 days at the hospital, and as he came back home, he called a meeting for him and Zara to have an agreement. As they sat in the sitting room, Mr. Joe told Zara, "I know I forced you to marry me. I know I cannot force you to love me, but I am now your husband. Tell me what you want and I will do it, but we are not getting any divorce. You are my wife." Zara said, "First you must release Ikenna from the police station." Mr. Joe jumped in. "I will do that on one condition. He must write an undertaking that any day he comes close to you, he will be arrested again, and this time he will go away for a long time." Zara agreed. Then she said, "I will be the one to employ all the workers in this house, since I am the woman of the house." Mr. Joe agreed, and she said, "You must give my father 10% of the shares in the company and also increase his salary. And from now you must never talk with my mother, or give her any money ever again." Mr. Joe asked why. "Is she not your mother?" Zara replied, "These are my conditions. Then I will have my own personal bedroom. I will sleep in your room the days you want me to, but I need my own privacy." Mr. Joe said, "It is done." Then she added, Finally, you must pay Kenneth 2 million for taking me away from him. If you do this, this marriage will work. No more drama. Mr. Joe was happy. He said, if all this will make this marriage work, I will do them immediately. Then he smiled and said, I told you money will fix everything along the way. Zara smiled and said nothing. The next day, Mr. Joe released Ekena and the police made him sign an undertaking, and Mr. Joe paid him 2 million. He settled all Zara's requests, and after 6 months, the family went back to normal. Zara became a good wife to Mr. Joe. She employed the kind of people she wanted around the house, and anyone that does not obey her will. As the final decision in the house, she fired them and employed another. Mr. Joe was happy. 6 months later, Zara got pregnant and gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Nobody heard from Ekena again. He left the village and disappeared. 5 years later, everything was going well in Mr. Joe's family. Zara, who studied online, had become a graduate and holds a top position in Mr. Joe's factory. She managed to convince her husband to give her 30% of the share in the company, and he did. One morning, Mr. Joe was sitting with his wife in the living room when he received a call from his personal secretary that a German company have come to establish the same factory that produced same product as Mr. Joe's factory, in another part of the village. Mr. Joe told his secretary, get some boys, pay them some money, let them burn that place to the ground. I don't want competition here at all. This is my village. Zara jumped in and said, baby, we don't need to do that. Let's just put an eye on them. If anything happens, it will be traced back to you. Mr. Joe thought about it for a while and said, it is a good idea. He told his secretary, put an eye on them. Let me know what is going on there. 6 months later, the company started hiring, and they paid the workers way more than what Mr. Joe was paying. Mr. Joe was using the people in the village to make money, and he treated them like slaves without proper benefits. So as the new company started hiring, most of his workers moved from his company to the new German company. Before you know it, his company started losing business. People hardly buy from him. They started buying from the new German company. Mr. Joe looked for a way to set up the company and bring them down, but all his plans failed. One morning, Mr. Joe left home and went straight to meet with the owner of the German company so they can come to an agreement and form an alliance. As he got there, he was surprised. It was Ekena, who left the community many years ago, that owns the company. He traveled out of the country to Germany and made a deal after schooling in Germany for them to come build the company for him in his father's land in the village. Mr. Joe was shocked. He shouted, you small boy. I own part of this company because it is my money that you used to go and become who you are today. And he sued the company to court that Ekena must give him 50% share of the company because he is the one that sponsored him and made him who he is. He left there. He went back home. As he got home, he called out his wife, but she was not at home. He went into her bedroom. She was not there. So he called her phone and she said she is at the office. As he was about to leave her room, he saw a bottle of medication on her bed. He looked at it and discovered it was medication that stops women from getting pregnant. Mr. Joe was confused. He asked himself, what is Zara doing with this? Did we ever say we are not having any more kids? It's been over 7 years. As he stepped out of her room, Zara came home to find him in the sitting room. He showed her the bottle and asked her, what is the meaning of this? Zara said, why did you go to Ekena's company and sue him to court? Mr. Joe was surprised. He said, how did you know about that? Zara said, because he told me. Mr. Joe was shocked. Have you been in communication with that small boy? He shouted. Zara said, I have not only been in communication with him, he is the father of my kids. Mr. Joe couldn't believe what he just heard. He could not breathe. It was like his heart will come out of his mouth, and he fainted. Later that day, Mr. Joe woke up in the hospital. Zara and Ekena were there. He saw them but could hardly speak because he had no strength. Zara said to him. Mr. Joe, my dear husband, you broke my love with Ekena, but we vowed that we would never leave each other. He got me pregnant while he lived in our house, in my room. That was why I had to hire my own staffs in the house. Each time he comes into the country from Germany, he come home to me, we make love in my room, and when he goes around town, he uses a disguise, till he leaves the country again. While he was outside the country studying, we never lost contact for one day. All the while I slept with you, I regretted it, and I always used the pills to prevent falling pregnant for you. We both endured it because we needed to have our revenge. You have enough kids already, so you don't need more. We have built our wealth. I have enough money to challenge you anywhere. He has all he takes now to be the kind of husband any woman deserves, thanks to you. So right now, we are taking back our lives. This village has suffered in your hands over the years because you feel you can do whatever you like and get away with it. Not anymore. Our company will fight you to the ground. Our paperwork are ready. The police have been notified over the years the way you run your company and about all your illegal operation in this town, using the young women of this village to traffic drugs abroad. That is how you lost your 3 wives in the process. You have only one option. When you get out of here, my father owns 10% of your company, I own 30% of your company. Sell me the rest of the company and leave this village for good, or else, we will make sure the day you get out of this hospital, you will be arrested and locked away, and that will not be good for your age. Mr. Joe couldn't believe what he was hearing. Zara smiled and said, "Do you remember what I told you on the day of our wedding? I said I will make your life a living hell. In your next life, if you ever get that opportunity, never mess with a woman in love." Ekena came forward and said, "Sir, this small boy like you used to call me, is now bigger than you. We will be waiting for you to sign over the rest of the shares of the company to my wife. You have 2 days and all deals are off." Zara and Ekena left the hospital laughing. 2 days later, Mr. Joe came out of the hospital, sold the company to Zara and relocated overseas to stay with his children. Story ends. Moral of this story: money can buy everything, but money can't buy love. Also, do not oppress people because you are rich. Table always turns and you might not always be on top. I remain Uncle Sam. Stay safe.